Welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar covering the COVID-19 business support the government has announced for the self-employed. So today we are going to be covering very much all the different announcements for the self-employed with a Q&A session at the end of that. And just a quick intro, I'm James Matton. I'm the Group Business Development Director for TaxAssist Accountants. I'm also joined with two highly qualified professionals with me in Andy Gibbs, who's our Senior Technical Manager, and Gary Clark, who's another of our technical managers who are qualified tax experts who come online today to answer as many questions as we can possibly go through. So what topics are we going to be covering today? As was announced by Rishi Sunak, there was a income support for the self-employed grants were announced. There's been a number of other measures announced around funding, and what we'd like to do today is dive into some of that. We also had an announcement this morning, which Andy's going to be covering for you, and then towards the end we'd like to just go through how accountants can help and answer some of those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Andy Gibbs, and he's going to walk you through this topic. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James, and welcome everybody to the presentation. It's been, as things go, quite an exciting day for the self-employed in terms of the COVID announcements, because we've actually had some fresh information today. So it's quite nice to be able to bring you something fresh, something which hasn't really been covered before. So if we just give a bit of background to this, what we're going to look at today is one of the main planks of support the government announced in respect of the coronavirus, which is a grant for self-employed people and partners. In terms of the timeline of how things have been announced, the government initially advised that they would be making support for the self-employed after an awful lot of pressure, it must be said as well, and a number of gaps still remain. So we are petitioning strongly to try and close those gaps, and as more information becomes available in terms of how the actual various government schemes will operate, we will be bringing that all to you. We do have a good wealth of support for you in our coronavirus hub. So if you come onto our website, taxassist.co.uk, you'll find that we have a number of support services for you. We also have a number of articles and a number of tools that will help you, and some tools which we'll be releasing later, which will help you really get to the nitty-gritty and work out some of the numbers as well. So the original government announcement was made on the 26th of March, where they gave some bare bones details about how this scheme would work. Today they've gone further and published some additional guidance with some examples, and we'll run through those examples just so that you can start to see how the self-employed will be supported and what kind of grant you'll actually be getting. It's also worth noting that for this topic we're looking at self-employed individuals. So that's quite distinct from people who work in limited companies, who are maybe directors of their own limited companies. We've got much support for those guys as well. So if you do need any support, as they say, your first port of call, if it isn't your TaxAssist accountant, will be to hop onto our web pages, where you'll find the COVID Hub will give a range of support which goes through all the various options. Now we will touch that towards the end of this presentation, but the main focus of today, this is the second presentation we've given, is really focusing on the latest announcements by government for the self-employed. It's important to note that with this scheme, one of the things that the HMRC have made clear is that you can't apply for it yet. So HMRC have asked you not to contact them because this will just delay them. Unfortunately, they won't really give you any answers just yet. So unfortunately, there'll be no HMRC announcements for a little while. They've given us a timeline of when they think things will start to happen. Unfortunately, you know, in this game, there's always people out there to try and take advantage of us. So one of the warnings that HMRC have said, you know, if you get any suspicious looking emails asking you to click buttons or click links to make claims, then ignore them as they're almost certainly fraudulent. At the moment, they don't intend to contact you, so it's just worth reiterating that for HMRC. HMRC will aim to make contact with you by mid-May. So in terms of how this will unfold, it will be a while yet. So you won't be getting an instant clarification from HMRC. So hopefully this presentation will be useful to you to start to work out what sort of grant figure you can anticipate getting. We will be releasing additional support tools to help you make those calculations, and your TaxAssist accountant will be very pleased to help you with those as well. Once HMRC have made contact with individuals, that won't be the end of the process. HMRC doesn't intend to start making payments until early June 2020. We anticipate that they will need accountants to help make those claims and be part of that process. We'll keep you constantly updated as things progress in that area. But it is important to note that there's nothing to do directly with HMRC at this stage. In terms of the support on offer, what HMRC plan to give the self-employed is a taxable grant, which will be worth up to 80% of your trading profit, up to a maximum of £2,500 for 3 months. So we'll come on to some examples and some of the caveats that come with that, but that's the broad thrust of what's on offer. It is a grant, and as with most grants, it will be subject to income tax and national insurance contributions. So if your grant was, say, for the example, £5,000, then that would be included in your turnover figure in your self-assessment pages once they're completed. So it will count as taxable income in itself. Subject to income tax, sole traders also pay a number of national insurance deductions. They also have to pay, namely Class 4 is one of the main ones that will be affected by this. So there'll be tax and national insurance implications on receiving the grant. Some people will need to make universal credit claims to maintain their income, but it's just important to note at this stage that this grant will also feature and figure into those calculations. So your grant income will also count towards that universal credit income amount. We'll come on to some specific examples, giving some numbers, but the main idea of it is that you'll get a grant based on your average trading profit over 3 tax years. So a UK tax year runs from the 6th of April in a particular year up to the 5th of April. So when we're talking about tax years here, we're talking about UK tax years ending 5th of April. So it's the 3 tax years that they're concerned about are 2016-17, 2017-18 and 2018-19. Put very simply, what HMRC will do is they will take the average, they will take those trading figures and then divide by 3 to come up with your average. There's going to be a few individuals that haven't yet submitted tax returns for all 3 years, so there's some special consideration for those individuals. HMRC will work out your average profit based on a continuous period of self-employment, which will either be tax years 2018, 17-18 and 18-19, the tax year 2018-19 only, even if you were self-employed in tax year 2016-17. So for people that have got outstanding returns or maybe haven't done all years, you may need to speak to an accountant if you want to get a little bit of clarification on exactly how your averaging will work out. As we said before, the grant will be 80% of your average trading profit divided by 12 to give you a monthly amount. If it runs for 3 months, you'll get 3/12 of that figure. The maximum, though, that can be paid is £2,500 a month, whichever is lower. So 80% of your average trading profits or 2,500, the lower will be taken. And in terms of payment, HMRC intend to pay that directly into your bank account in one instalment. So we're still waiting for a number of details, and as I say, we're digesting all of the details that have come out from HMRC today. There's a few other eligibility criteria just to consider as well. So HMRC have said there are a number of things that you need to do, a number of hoops to jump through in order to be able to make a claim as a sole trader. You have to have submitted your self-assessment tax return for the year ended 2018-19. If you haven't yet submitted your tax return, that's really something now to prioritise in terms of your to-do list. That really is something that you need to make sure that you get done. We'll come on to what happens if you don't get it done in a second, but it really is important to focus the mind now. If you haven't yet done your 2018-19 tax return, which was due by 31st of January, so it would now be late, then it's really important to prioritise getting that tax return in. As well as submitting your 2018-19 tax return, you have to have traded in the tax year ended 5th of April 2020. So that's the tax year that's just gone. So you have to have traded in that tax year. You have to be trading when you apply for the grant. The revenue do make a kind of exception because they say if you would have been trading except for COVID-19, then they will allow you to make a claim. So for an example, you may be in the unfortunate situation where your trade has been negatively impacted by the pandemic. You may be in the restaurant trade and you may simply no longer be trading. That won't prohibit you making a claim, but you will have to continue or intend to continue to trade in the current tax year, which is going from the 5th of April 20, or the 6th of April 2020 up to 5th of April 2021. So they're the three eligibility criteria, or some of the main eligibility criteria that HMRC are working out in order to determine who can make grant claims. You can already see that this is unfair in some ways because HMRC have set a number of criteria, and as a result of that, people who have just started trading or who haven't done 18-19 tax returns because they weren't trading, they're going to be disadvantaged from this scheme. We don't think that's fair, and we are petitioning government to listen to us and listen to those very real concerns. We are hopeful that the government may change tack. There's plenty of time for them to do it, so we do hope that they will see sense. And for the people that aren't protected, and for the people that aren't covered by this scheme, we hope that there is an extension for them. HMRC also said that you have to have lost trading or partnership profits due to COVID-19 in order to be able to make a claim. And what they've specifically said is that you'll need to confirm to HMRC that your business has been adversely affected by coronavirus, and HMRC will, as usual, use a risk-based approach to compliance. So we don't really know what exactly that means. Most businesses, you would assume, will have been negatively affected by this pandemic. It's very hard to see what specifically HMRC mean by their warning there, and we're waiting for some more guidance. As soon as we have it, we will share that with you. But we're not yet sure what that actually means. There's going to be many businesses that are adversely affected at the moment by the coronavirus, but we all hope that these lockdowns are soon lifted. Obviously, we want to keep everybody safe. We want to make sure that we adhere to all the government guidelines, do as we're told. But ultimately, we're all hoping that soon these restrictions can be lifted for us. And sometime later in the year, we're anticipating that our demands for our services in whatever business we're in will all start picking up again. And as they pick up, we might see our trading profits lift. So, it isn't going to necessarily be easy to clarify exactly what an negative effect of coronavirus will be on our business. But nevertheless, that's something that we'll keep watching to see what HMRC say. The other stipulation that HMRC have said to try and restrict people who are maybe very wealthy from benefiting from the grant is HMRC have said that trading profits must be no more than £50,000 and more than half of your total income. So they're saying that the trading profits can't be more than £50,000 and they must be more than half of your income. This is to try to exclude people who've maybe privileged enough to have a large amount of investment income. They stipulate that the more than half of your total income must be for either the 2018-19 year or the average of the tax years 2016-17 through to 2018-19. So we'll come back to have a look at an example of how those restrictions could impact on potentially making a claim. And to reiterate what we said earlier, if you have not yet submitted your self-assessment tax return for the year 2018-19, please do make that a priority, because you must do this by the 23rd of April 2020, or you won't be able to make a claim. This is what HMRC have said today. We don't know, we suspect they won't relax that. So there is a real incentive. If you've got the potential to make a grant, there's money on the table here from the government, please do make that a priority to get the 2018-19 tax return submitted. HMRC will use figures from your 2018-19 tax return to identify if you are eligible. So this will be done automatically behind the scenes. HMRC will also review any late tax returns which are filed before the 23rd of April 2020. It's important to say that HMRC will review that in the normal way, but obviously HMRC will look very carefully at those late submitted returns. Although they haven't explicitly said that, I think that probably, I don't know if Gary would agree with me there, that would be something that they would look to.
Definitely in the guidance they've said about their risk-based approach, which they also always use. So we do strongly think that if your tax return has been submitted late, well, before the 23rd of April, they will closely at the figures. We've already done calculations to indicate that it's actually not worth over-egging your profits for that year, because the extra tax that we do will outweigh the grant you're going to get. So there are any points to do that, but we think they'll still be looking very closely at them.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to make. You know, it's it's worth getting some advice if you are in a situation where you're about to file a tax return and you're unsure of anything. Please do get some advice, because the revenue will almost certainly be looking at returns as they're submitted, if they are submitted late. There's also another clarification today, which was quite interesting, wasn't it, Gary, really, in terms of what the revenue will be doing in terms of how they'll be looking at these returns.
Yeah, definitely. So something that was announced only this morning, as we were almost prepared for the presentation today. The new guidance came out. What they've said is that if you've submitted an amendment to your tax return for one reason or another after the date of the original announcement, which was the 26th of March, then they won't be taking into account any amendments that we've made to the tax return for 18-19.
We were all wondering how they would actually work this scheme, and I suspect the reason why this scheme has taken a lot longer than the other main government support, which is known to people who are employees as the furlough support for employees. And the reason why is because sole traders are much more complicated in essence, and how losses and other things collide with all these new rules is really quite difficult. It was always difficult for us to imagine how HMRC would plan that with a little bit more guidance on that. But they've unequivocally just gone ahead and said that they won't accept amendments to the returns after the 26th of March. In terms of calculating the grant, you can still amend your return. The amendment will still stand for other purposes. But in terms of calculating this grant, they have announced a cut-off. And I suspect very strongly that was an attempt to prevent fraud creeping into the system. HMRC will assess your eligibility for the grant based on your total income and your trading profits. And as we said before, they will use the figures on your tax returns for the total trading income, which is your turnover, and they will then deduct any allowable business expenses and capital expenditure. So for those that are familiar with your own personal tax returns, those figures can be found on the self-employment pages. So if you maintain a copy of those for previous years, then do dig those out. Obviously, any of our own clients, we will be over time making contact and looking at those figures with you to determine, help you determine the amount of grants that are eligible. We've been a long while coming to this further clarification, so it was important to wait for this because we didn't have really a good picture of what the amounts would be. The clarification today is a welcome clarification which will certainly help a lot of taxpayers be more confident with the amount of money that they are entitled to and which they can expect to receive. But if you are wondering where those figures are coming from, they're coming from your self-assessment tax return from the sole trader pages. The income, therefore, the top line will be your turnover figure, and then from there will be expenses to deduct. There'll be the normal expenses that you would expect to see, so things like travel expenses, staff costs, cost of your business premises. The normal allowable tax expenses will then come off that turnover figure. HMRC have gone on to say that the expenses will also include any business expenses deducted through the trading allowance. So it's important, we'll come on to an example about the trading allowance, but it's just important to clarify what that means for people. Ordinarily, if you've got a sole trade business, you have your turnover and then you take off your allowable expenses. As we said, that could be staff costs, it could be the cost for your premises, the cost for your van. Those various expenses would then come off. There is an alternative way to calculate trading profits where you have very low expenses, and that's to make a flat rate deduction of £1,000, and that's known as the trading allowance. That is generally not applicable for most people because most people, to generate their business activity, have expenses much greater than £1,000. So we don't normally see that one, but that's just to clarify what HMRC mean by business expenses through the trading allowance. They also say that the expenses will include capital allowances. So what the revenue mean there is when a business incurs capital expenditure, for an example, you buy something which is going to have a benefit for several years to your business, it might be something like a van, then you aren't allowed to make a straight deduction for that because they say it's capital expenditure and you aren't allowed that as a deduction. But you can claim for what they call capital allowances, which is a kind of tax allowable way to account for that capital expenditure. And the revenue have clarified that capital allowances will be reducing income. They also mentioned qualifying care relief. Won't spend too much on that, but qualifying care relief really relates to foster carers. So generally, people who are looking after children in foster care won't be so much affected by the coronavirus because I suspect they haven't had that much disruption to their payments, so they perhaps wouldn't be eligible anyway. But the revenue have gone on and said that the special deduction that they get for qualifying care relief will in fact be taken as an expense from their business. In practice, what that means is a lot of foster carers will probably not be able to make a claim through this, but it will depend on individual circumstances. And also any flat rate expenses which are put through. Flat rate expenses are normally allowable. It's normally the things that an accountant will think of putting through. Tax allowable flat rate expenses include things like when you use your home for office, there are flat rate expenses which HMRC allow you to deduct from your expenditure. With losses for sole traders, you have a number of choices when you have losses for sole traders. So it's been one of the confusing factors for clients and us to work out how HMRC would actually deal with the losses. But HMRC have now gone on record to say that they will not deduct any losses carried forward from previous years, nor will they take off the personal allowance. So losses will be dealt with in a very specific way, and they won't be, if you have losses in a previous year, be brought forward to reduce future income. So if we now have a look at some numbers, that's probably the more interesting thing, just to get a feel for how this scheme will work. So if we imagine somebody who's been trading for several years, and we look back in the year ended 5th of April 2017, 5th of April 2018, and 5th of April 2019, and we see this profit pattern. So in year one in 2016-17, they made a profit of £60,000. Then in 2017-18, they made another profit of 60,000, and then they made a loss in 2018-19. We weren't sure how HMRC would actually treat that loss, but they have now today given us that clarification, and in effect, they have required us to net it off. So in this particular example, we would add our £60,000 profit from 2016-17, we would add our £60,000 profit from 17-18, and then we would take off our £30,000 loss from 18-19. So that would give us a profit of £90,000. And we would need to average that over the 3 years, so we would divide by 3. That would give us an average profit of £30,000. So in terms of what you can then claim as a grant, it will be the lower of 80% of your average trading profit divided by 12, or £2,500. So in this case, it's going to be £30,000 multiplied by 80% divided by 12 to give £2,000 a month. That is lower than the £2,500 a month. So the individual in these circumstances would be expecting to receive a taxable grant from HMRC of £2,000 for the 3 months. So in total, a grant of £6,000. So that would be quite an important shot in the arm for a lot of sole traders. So these figures are quite meaningful for individuals. So it's important to start having a look to really work out what you'll be eligible to be able to claim. There are, as always, going to be a few funny areas. So we would advise you to, where you're not comfortable doing those calculations, seek professional advice. An accountant will be able to help you with those calculations. If we look at another example, so no trade in 2016-17. So in this particular example, the individual didn't trade in the earlier year, but they made a profit of £25,000 in 2017-18, and then a profit of £45,000 in 2018-19. How does the average work in this case? Well, we add them together for the 2 years and then divide by 2. So we add our £25,000 to the £45,000, have a £70,000 profit, and then divide that by 2. So our average profit would be £35,000. We then apply the same logic that we did before. So we're looking at 80% of that £35,000 divided by 12, which is £2,333 a month. And it's that or £2,500 the lower of. So in this case, again, that individual would be eligible to claim a grant for £2,333 per month for the 3 months. Again, assuming that they have had profits negatively impacted by coronavirus, they meet the eligibility criteria. That would be their taxable grant that they would receive a cheque from the government for. We have another example here. So more than one trade in the same tax year. Some individuals will be running multiple trades. So you might be trading as, say, a carpenter, and you may have a very different trade as, say, a lecturer, as an example. So you've got maybe 2 different trades going on. How would that work for the purposes of the averaging? You net them off is the answer. So if you're in this example, if you only traded in 2018-19, you made a profit of £60,000 for your first trade and a £20,000 loss for the second trade, your trading profit would be netted off. So it would be a £40,000 profit that you would have. This is an example here of the trading allowance. This is perhaps not relevant for so many people. It's where you don't have a lot of expenses and you're taking a flat rate £1,000 deduction. As we said before, most people will have further expenses, not greater than £1,000. Their premises costs, the use of their home may be other expenses. So we wouldn't expect this to normally be the case, but nevertheless, we've just included an example there. So if you had £20,000 trading profit in 3 years, 2016-17, 2017-18, 2018-19, and you claimed £1,000 as a trading allowance, how that would work for the average is you would deduct £1,000 from £20,000 to arrive at a figure of £19,000 as an average trade. So there is a specific provision for the trading allowance. It won't be that common. In most cases, we would expect most people out there to be claiming normal expenses, which would be more than £1,000. Just also quickly to flick back a little bit, really, to look at some of the eligibility criteria, because we said before that your trading profits must be no more than £50,000 and more than half of your total income for either the tax year 2018-19 or the average of the tax years 2016-17, 2017-18 and 2018-19. We'll just quickly put up an example of, in this case, the restrictions don't apply, but the sorts of things that you need to be looking at to work out whether you're going to have a restriction on your grant. So in this particular example, we imagine an average trading profit of £50,000. So the individual has made a net trading profit for their sole trade in 2016-17 of £50,000. They also had pension income, so they had some additional income. So this is really where the government are trying to say, restrict you where you have lots of other income. Total income in that particular year was £65,000. Trading profit was more than half of the total income, so they're okay on that year. 2017-18, the trading profit was again, same figures in fact. So we're going to be okay in that year. We've got our trading profit again at 50,000, our 15k of pension income, and trading profits are more than half of total income. So we're okay on 17-18. 2018-19, unfortunately, in this example, the individual made a loss of £10,000 for that tax year. So they had a loss of £10,000, they had pension income of £15,000, total income of only £5,000. And in this year, trading profits are not more than half of the total income, so they've got a problem. But it doesn't matter, because even though they made that loss in 2018-19, they would still be eligible for the grant, because the average trading profit for the 3 tax year is actually £30,000, which is less than £50,000. So that average trading profit, which is in our final column there, over the 3 years is the 50 plus the 50 minus 10. That's 90,000 divided 3, so you've got £30,000 there. And that, in fact, is that trading profit is more than half of the total income when it comes to looking at the total income of £45,000. So you've got £30,000 compared to £45,000. So we wanted to give you really there some real examples of how these calculations will work. Hopefully they are useful as a starting point. Many people will be in hopefully a more straightforward situation, but you can see there could be instances where you won't be eligible to make a grant if, for example, you have lots of other income. So again, do come and speak to us. We would be happy to help you work out your eligibility. It's going to be a main concern. We know that people, businesses desperately needing cash, desperately needing to keep money flowing to keep business going. So do come and speak to us if you've got any queries on the specifics there. On that point as well, there are a number of other things you can do as a sole trader to help your position, and some of these things you can do now. So some of the other things that the government have announced, they've announced there is a deferral of income tax payments for sole traders and other taxpayers. The way the UK tax system works is that generally you assess your income for a tax year ending on the 5th of April, and then you pay the tax due and submit the return by the following January. Where income flirts above certain levels, in addition to the payment of tax, you have to pay what they call payments on account. They're due in January and July. The government have said the July payments on account can be deferred until January 2021. So accountants can help you with your cash flow. We can help you work out how much money will fall due and when. If you have in the situation where you'll be able to defer your income tax payment, which would ordinarily be due in July, it's also really worthwhile to start looking back to see if the January payment was actually all needed. Because in actual fact, in 2019-20, if profits have dipped, you may be in a situation where if you get your tax return in early, we can actually look back and get that January payment back, or indeed some of it. So one thing I think we'd like to emphasise now is be an early bird. You know, if for your 2019-20 tax return, we can now start to look filing you. So please do bring records in. Please do contact us if you'd like us to do a tax return for you, because now really is a good time to start getting really ahead with those numbers, so that if there's any refunds to claim, we claim them for you. And if there's any deferrals, we make you aware of them, both so that you don't have to worry about July payments, but also so that when it comes to the following January, you're well aware of how much money you're going to need to put away to pay that tax. We can also help with deferral of VAT payments. Just a housekeeping point on there, if you are looking after your own VAT, the government have announced a deferral window, but it does require you to cancel your direct debits. So again, if you need any help with that, come and speak to us. We'd be happy to help. Business grants may also be available in certain instances where you have premises. So if you do have your own shop, there's some really valuable grants which you may be entitled to, in certain sectors up to £25,000, in other sectors up to £10,000. They won't always be applicable, but do come and speak to us and we can help determine what level of grant you may be entitled to. And finally, the business interruption loan scheme. We all know that, you know, people are struggling at the moment. You need to look at ways to manage cash flow, and the government have brought in some more schemes to help with that. If you need help with modelling your cash flow, if you need help to understand your business, please do get in contact with us, because we can help with those schemes as well. And that really is what one of the main points we'd like to close with before we move to some questions, because we really think, you know, now is a really good time to make use of professional advice. Now is a really good time to get and understand your numbers. We mentioned just a few of the schemes that are available. We mentioned earlier in the presentation, you may be entitled to universal credit payments. You may also be in a scenario where you're going to struggle to pay your rent. That may be rent on premises. It may be your own individual home. You may struggle to pay mortgage payments. With all of those things, really understanding your numbers is the starting point for you to be able to get ahead. Because if you can understand your numbers and what payments are due, you can then start to have the conversations with the banks, with the lenders and with landlords to really sort out payment plans, let them know that there may be some disruption to payments. And hopefully this scheme, the self-employment scheme, will help you with money. You can then start to say, well, you know, I may get payment later in June, which will allow you to keep your business running. Do take advantage of every single government scheme that you're entitled to. At TaxAssist, we'd like to be your main source of information. If you could please have a look at our business hub, our coronavirus hub, you'll find a huge number of resources which will help you understand all the various schemes that you may be entitled to. We can help you make key decisions, and we can help you analyse your situation. That won't always be the most complex analysis. It can sometimes be straightforward. It can just be the assurance that help is on the way, that you may get some grant funding, whether it's for your premises, by the way of a business grant, or indeed this self-employment scheme. If you are making use of other schemes, you may be in a situation listening to this where you are a sole trader, but you may also be in a situation where you're a director of a limited company. You may be furloughing workers, you may be furloughed yourself. If you want help with those, we can those scenarios, we can put you in touch with employment lawyers to help with those questions as well. And of course, sole traders employ people. If you do need any help with the other government schemes, for an example, if you do have, as a sole trader, staff and you are going to struggle to pay them, make use of all the government resources. As we said before, there's money on the table here. Those resources can allow you in certain circumstances to continue to pay staff, but they won't be able to do any work for you. And that has to be better than laying staff off in many scenarios. So if you do need any help with that, then again, please do get in contact with us. I think we'd just like to close off this section again, just to say, please do talk to us. We're here to help and to help you and also advise you. If you do need any help with your numbers, again, that's really one thing where, which is right up our street, something we can definitely help with. If you're struggling with numbers, give us a call, we can help. And finally, there's a vast array of government schemes. We're disappointed on two levels that the government weren't quick to put money into people's pockets and quick to get the clarification on the scheme, but they are starting to move. We've had some positive news this week and last week about people applying for other grants for their business premises, and we hope that good news continues and HMRC can accelerate payments to people who desperately need it. So do make use of all the schemes and do make use of us for any help that you may have. Hopefully we've answered most of the questions that you would have in respect to the self-employment scheme, but we have had a number of questions that have come in while the presentation has been running, and we have had a number of questions that we've already received. So we'd like to spend a little bit of time going through some of those questions, and I think, Gary, if we go through some of the ones that we've recently had.
Yeah, there seems to be some common threads for the questions that were asked in advance of the webinar and we've seen coming through. So I'd just like to start with the first one, which is that it's been difficult for people to try and find clarification of whether whether this is actual grant which is repayable at some point in time, or whether it's just a grant which isn't repayable. The information we have at the moment certainly confirms that it's not going to be repayable to the government. There may be circumstances in which it is. So, Andy's been through the points, the eligibility points. One of those is that you have to be adversely affected by the coronavirus in order to get the grant. And at the moment, we don't know exactly what that means, but once that is clarified, it may be that if you can't prove that you were adversely affected, then yes, maybe it needs to be paid back, but otherwise, you don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have been asking that. I mean, we're getting a lot of questions in. We know all the offices are getting a lot of questions in because people are desperate for information here. Becky Farrer's come with a question. Gary, she's a business partnership. We said earlier in the presentation that this scheme will apply to partners, so partners will be able to make use of the scheme. Becky is in business with a colleague, and they operate a small gardening business. They apportion their profits out on however they split their profits, and then submit the returns to pay the taxes, including our portion of the partnership profit. With the £50,000 limit, she's asked if that will be applied to the partnership or individual.
We're fairly confident, in fact, very confident that they're talking, when they come to the £50,000 limit, they're talking about the individual partner's share of profits rather than the total partnership profit. So if you've got a partnership that has a total profits of £80,000, they'll be split equally or in whatever partnership share they have. But say those profits are split £40,000 each, we think that those two partners would still be eligible for relief under this scheme. Yeah,
a good point. I mean, I think partners will always feel a little bit less confident with maybe the numbers, because on their personal returns they will only see a partnership figure. So unless they have access to the partnership return, they won't have all those figures. So that may definitely be something to clarify with your accountant if you want to understand exactly what you're going to potentially be able to get. Virginia's asked a question. It's in two parts really. She's asked, if you have income from self-employment and employment, what government support will be due and how will it be calculated?
Yeah, if I just take that point first then. So if you have two sources of income, Andy showed a good example earlier, which somebody with a pension. Now you can substitute that income with employment income. So if you still need to look at the eligibility, which means that if your total income, if your self-employed profits are not more than 50% of your total income, then you should be eligible. So what you're going to need to look at is if you do have employment income alongside your self-employment, you need to look at the ratios in which you have that. And you also need to take into account other income that you have. So you may have property income, interest, dividends, and things like that. So yeah, the key is to make sure that not more than half of your income comes from other sources other than self-employment.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, Gary. It is important where you have more complex scenarios to maybe take some advice. And I think also on that one, you may actually be eligible, I think, for two schemes. You may actually be eligible for the self-employment scheme. And if you were an employee who was furloughed, you may be continuing to be paid through that furlough arrangement. So I would say, Virginia, definitely maybe worth speaking to someone to confirm exactly your scenario, because it depends whether you mean your employment as a director of your own limited company or whether you're actually an employee and whether you're going to be paid. Obviously, if you're paid as normal, then you won't be furloughed and your employer won't be taking advantage of that scheme. But there will be some individuals who will be benefiting from both. They will be furloughed from work, not doing their employment work, receiving their furlough pay through their employer, and also potentially eligible for this grant. I think that's as we understand it. And as Gary said, I think he answered the second part of your query, Virginia, because we also mentioned you have to look at all of your income in the round. That is quite important to determine whether it's that more than 50% to be eligible for the grant. Nick Wilson's asked a question: will any of the government grant be payable if I still have some income coming in over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think that's a similar question to the first one, although we've tagged on a bit about basically whether you're allowed to continue to trade during the period in which you're getting the grant. So with the, going back to the furlough scheme, which is for the employed rather than the self-employed, there's quite clear criteria there where those employees who are furloughed aren't supposed to be doing any work. In fact, they shouldn't be doing any work in order for them to be eligible, whereas the self-employed scheme is different, and in fact quite the opposite. So you can still continue to carry out your self-employed activities and still be eligible for the grant. But I'll just go back to the same point again, which is that at some point you're going to need to show that your profits and your business has been adversely affected by what's going on. So yeah, just better keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's one for us all to watch. You know, I mean, we've all been affected negatively in some way or another by the coronavirus, but self-employed people aren't like employees. They're not submitting monthly or even quarterly report to the government of what we earn. We do once a year for the self-assessment, so it's going to be perhaps quite hard to understand exactly what the government means. And I suspect they're probably still grappling it with themselves, aren't they, to be fair? So it's probably why they haven't given that much clarification just yet on what they mean. Guys asked a question to ask whether the monetary assistance to this, I think that's what we've just done, isn't it? Oh no, it's may I ask whether the monetary assistance to the self-employed in June will be backdated? Also, if any earnings between now and then will affect the amount payable?
I think we partly answered the second point there. Is that any earnings, will it affect the amount payable? I think earnings from the same trade, again, going back to that same point, you have to show that you're adversely affected. But just taking the first point, will it be backdated? Well, the scheme is to run from, I think, the correct 1st of March around to the 31st of May, and the payment will be made, as far as we know, at the beginning of June. So effectively it is backdated because we're now 14th of April. We're already 6 weeks into this from the 1st of March. So yes, backdated 1st of March.
Yeah, and I think that is a bit confusing at that point, because some people have been thinking, would I only get it for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? But it seems like if you qualify, you get it for the full 3 months, as we understand at the moment. I mean, it's important to note that the government, is moving at breakneck speed. We're getting updates every day, and behind the scenes in Whitehall, the civil servants will be writing a lot of legislation, rewriting rules, looking at things and coming back. So we don't have every single answer, but we are a little bit more sure-footed today than we were yesterday.
And I think we've seen guidance come out in the morning, and then obviously HMRC have had a chance to give it further thought and receive queries, and often within a day or so they've updated the guidance again, and we're really trying to keep up to date with anything that changes. We do have our finger on the pulse of anything that changes. And we'll be updating our guidance on the website as things change.
Literally as we speak, I think. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tina Robbins, she's asked a question. I'm still working 12 hours a week, though it seems that Tina's self-employed, working 12 hours a week in her business. She says she doesn't need the 8%, just a top-up. Do I need to do anything or wait for an email from HMRC because I'm scared of the scam email that I might get the wrong one? I think there's 2 bits to that. In one way, I think, Gary, we just answered that really, which is that if you can show that you've been negatively impacted, we think you would be able to claim irrespective that you're still working.
Yeah. I think the other point that she might be making there is about the small business grant as far as her rates is concerned, because presumably it sounds as though she has premises. She may be eligible for the £10,000 grant or the £25,000 grant, which would come via a local authority. I think the point she might be making is, can she receive either of those 2 grants and the self-employed income support scheme grant? There's no one or the other. We think that she'll be entitled to both of those. There's no exclusivity. Both of those will apply.
Yeah, and I think also, a lot of people watching this will be interested in several government schemes. And as Gary, you say, that the business rate is a really, really important one. The other really important one is the furlough scheme, which we sort of briefly mentioned and we've covered previously in our webinars. As more and more details come for that one, we will let you know. And that one is really focused on employees and what they can claim. And it's actually quite, confusing the schemes is quite important not to do, because I think there's a lot of information out there. And as we said earlier, there's a lot of scammers out there. So just be very careful with any emails and don't click links from sources that you don't know. Neil Thompson, he said, being self-employed and obviously not earning any money at the moment. So unfortunately, Neil isn't in a position where he's able to earn any money. How do I apply for the government payment? Are they contacting us or the accountants? I realised they said that it would be June, but there was little information about how we gain access to it. Could we give a little bit more explanation there?
Yeah. The government have made it very, very clear at the moment that there's no application process. They've said that HMRC will contact each of the taxpayers that will be eligible. Obviously, what we're doing at the moment is encouraging people to make their own decisions with the help of their accountants, of course, to see whether they will be eligible. Because if they don't receive a letter from HMRC or another notification to say that they'll be eligible, then obviously they want to be pursuing that as quick as they can.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And we've had a question from Jonathan Tarbert. I wasn't eligible for government income support based on my 18-19 returns. In Jonathan's case, it was because more than 50% of his income during the year came from regular employment. So this is one of those cases that we were talking about earlier in our examples. Can I apply for support based on 19-20 returns, which is currently being prepared, which is completely self-employed?
Yeah. I think unfortunately Jonathan might be one of these people who at the moment is slipping between the gaps in the system. Andy mentioned that we've lobbied quite hard and written to Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, to highlight cases like this. So unfortunately, I don't, based on what he's told us in his question, I don't think he's going to be eligible. As I say, Andy might want to expand on what exactly we have said in that letter.
Yeah, it's Jonathan. We feel for you because it's that there are cracks in this support. The government, in some ways, have been very generous and have stepped up to the plate, and we're very thankful for that support. But there are still gaps. So in our open letter, we identified some of the many cases of individuals through no fault of their own will be impacted by this pandemic and will be worse off. And unfortunately, Jonathan, at the moment, it seems like you will be one of those individuals that slipped through the cracks through no fault of your own. It must be added. So we've written an open letter, as well as covering self-employed perceived deficiencies. We've also brought out other deficiencies for the furlough campaign for employees, because again, there are a number of employees who started after February who will also be ineligible to be furloughed, and that will be, in some cases, a terrible situation for those individuals to be in. We've identified those to government, and we will keep pressing on that point to try and increase the support. At the moment, though, based on the guidance that we've had, unfortunately, there will be some people slipping through those cracks. The advice that we would probably say is to maybe make a personal credit claim. Consider making one of those. It will not be potentially as generous or as lucrative as the grants in all cases, but it is possibly your best bet. And again, we did mention that there are payment holidays available for mortgage payers who may very well benefit, although you may not be able to benefit, we might not be able to help you get a grant, we would be able to benefit, go through your numbers to explain to you what your liabilities will, what you can do about future liabilities, ensure that in 2018-19 you make the most efficient use of your loss, because losses, you can do a number of things with them. It may be worth examining that again, Jonathan. And as we said, maybe applying for payment holidays, just to smooth you through so that you stand the best chance of pulling your business through this.
I think probably that's time as we've got to take a question. So yeah, hopefully you found that useful, practical examples of where we can help. And yeah, just really.
If people do have further queries, please do keep sending them in. Our local officers are very pleased to help you with any of those queries.
We're going to hand back to James.
I think James is waiting in the wings. So thank you very much from me.
And for me as well.
Thank you for your time.
Very much, Andy. Thank you, Gary. We really appreciate you coming online, presenting that information to us all and answering those questions. Just to give you a feel for the number of questions we've had, we covered 2 pages worth today, and we've had 19 pages worth submitted. We had a steady 220 participants onto this session, 22 live questions asked, and about 3 times that amount on the chat box as well. So we couldn't obviously answer them all within the hour, but we do have lists of all those questions, and we're going to be quite busy, I should imagine, working our way through all of those questions and trying to get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. Now, what we'd always recommend is, you seek the advice of a professional at all times. Everyone's circumstances will be individual to them, and you want to get the best answers, the right answers each time. So we have a network of over 220 TaxAssist accountants right across the UK. We're currently looking after 77,000 self-employed individuals and small business, independent business owners, landlords and taxpayers. So do get in touch with us. We've got an office near to you. As you can see, we are all working remotely. The 3 of us have come into the office today just to record this webinar, but as you can see, I've been kicked out into another room. So I'm self-isolating and next door with to Andy and Gary, and we're adhering to the distancing to keep everyone protected. We know it's very, very difficult out there. The trading situation for the self-employed, we feel that a whole host of self-employed individuals have been left behind. We're very passionate about this, and we've written a letter to the Chancellor, an open letter that you can find on our website. We are giving regular updates almost on a daily basis via our email newsletter. So if you visit our website, taxassist.co.uk, you can subscribe to that. It's free. We just want to share this information and get as much out as we possibly can. We're also very active on social media. So you'll find us there at TaxAssist UK, and you can follow us there for any live updates and content that we keep sharing. There's a whole business hub section that you can go and have a look at as well. And we're releasing more and more video to keep you as educated as possible on this topic. We will be running these on a regular basis. There will be another one next week. We've had an awful lot of questions around directors. So we're really focused today in on self-employed. We'll focus the next session, I think, on directors. There's been an awful lot of questions live. People on a session we did cover last week, but we're happy to cover again and go over those topics. There's a whole host of people who need answers and need that support. So we're really mindful of how difficult it is out there. We also have a survey coming out and would love for you to complete that for us. It's a very straightforward survey. The best way to become a part of that is go onto our website, register for our newsletters, and then you can opt into that. We can make sure we can get that survey out to you, because we'd like to collect everyone's views, all of those answers, everyone's experience in getting lending and dealing with, you know, all these government grants that are coming out, and really share that openly in local press, national press, and with the government as well. So we just want to get your voice heard. We can tell there's a huge groundswell of interest in understanding these changes. So please stay tuned. Any questions you've got, email them into hello@taxassist.co.uk. And thank you very much for attending. Thank you.